Hi students, Mr. Halpern here. This is the uh, presentation on biodiversity. What you should do is have your notes packet with you so you can take notes on the side. And any blanks that you didn't see, you can go into the filled in notes and fill those in. You do want to watch this video because it will give you a bit more detail than what your notes have, and it gives you a lot of visuals too. So in this first video, we're going to be going over characteristics of the biodiversity on Earth, numbers and how we describe it. We're also going to be understanding why we care about biodiversity as a first place as humans. And then we're going to go into the today's extinction and what's happening now in the sixth mass extinction in context to the other extinctions. So our notes start off with the Serengeti and how humans are deciding whether or not they should split up the Serengeti and increase the ability to transport and um, traverse this land. So for a long time, the three major animals, wildebeest, zebras, and antelope, have migrated across Africa. And as a result, a lot of the predator animals have followed along. And this follows the seasons. The Maasai were the people that were partially nomadic, and they were herding animals along the way. And this migration of the wildebeest, zebras, and antelope were helping that population of people for many generations. And the area spans two different countries, Tanzania and Kenya. Well, so for a long time, the reserves were isolating people from living in that Serengeti. However, the new Tanzanian president ran on a platform that promised to build a paved commercial highway through the Serengeti and connecting this area, as you can see here. So some of the proposed areas for a highway are the red and the blue there. The red one obviously cuts through and would cut through the migratory pattern of the animals. So as a result, the migration patterns would be cut in certain places. And as a result, those roads would potentially have a hazard and kill the animals. It would also give poachers easier access. And poaching is the act of illegally killing animals for parts for sale and for also medicinal purposes too. Human development as a result of the road would increase. Essentially, people would establish homes or businesses along the way. And the concern is that this would grow and grow until the population of humans would actually increase, which would impact the animals even further. So far, the African Court of Justice has blocked this plan, but recently in 2016 and 2019, the new president announced new plans for things like pipelines through the Serengeti, which again sparked the controversy of whether or not to split up the Serengeti. So in this case study is the implicit I guess, assumption that we care about biodiversity to begin with. And so we have to understand what is biodiversity and what are the different facets of biodiversity. So when I say biodiversity, what do you think of? Do you think of a particular place like the first slide of the coral reef with a lot of different colors and a lot of animals? Do you think of biodiversity in terms of habitat and ecosystem biodiversity? So having a lot of rich climates and in terms of temperature and precipitation. Do you think of biodiversity as the diversity within a species? So how genetically are we diverse? There are three actual ways of defining diversity, And diversity is the variety of life across all of these levels. And a species is a particular organism or set a group of organisms that have unique characteristics where it allows them to breed and produce fertile offspring. So if we talk about species diversity, within a species that can reproduce and produce fertile offspring, there is still variety. If you look at the human population, the human species, we see great diversity. And that's still true with all the different varieties of life. But diversity is a general term. We can describe diversity as species richness or species evenness. Species richness is the number of species, and the evenness or relative abundance is how many of each individual species we have. And we have a couple of ways of measuring diversity. One that we learned in class is the Shannon Diversity Index, or the Shannon-Weiner Diversity Index, where we measured the cars in the parking lot. We looked at what types of cars we had, and we studied both the richness and the evenness of each of those. And this is the formula that we used here. And this is the way of describing it, each of the variables within the formula. If you haven't done that lab or completed that lab, then we're going to be focusing on that relatively soon. Genetic diversity is the diversity of DNA within individuals. And the more genetic diversity you have, the less chance of what we call inbreeding depression, which is what we see in populations of cheetahs and Florida panthers and large cats. Because they're spread out so much and their territory is so large, there often is a chance of not interacting with as many other panthers and cheetahs that would increase the variety of DNA. And over many generations, the diversity can go down. It makes them vulnerable. And then ecosystem diversity, which is the number of ecosystems or habitats and a variety of places to live as organisms. So when we talk about biodiversity, it's important to think about a lot of ways in which the world is biodiverse. And if you look at this, take a second to really see a lot of the diversity. I'm going to move my camera here for a second. And as you can see here, the insects are really the most diverse group of organisms there. Of all the animals, particularly insects. Then we have mollusks like crabs and I'm sorry, other animal groups and then mollusks. So it really depends on where you are too. The more you're closer to the equator, the more variety of geographic area you have, the more solar energy you have. And so you have more diversity as you get to the equator. You see more species richness in places like the rainforest and chaparral and mangrove forests and coral reefs there. And the further out you go, the less diversity you have. For example, this is a picture of bird populations, and you have much fewer bird species as you get into Canada and further up into Alaska and further up into Canada. And as you get further down into Nicaragua and Costa Rica and places that are in South America, you have an increase in diversity. And we'll pause right there for the first video.